The three things that have moved from where you were a couple of years ago to where you are now, what are the three shifts, would you say, or the three drivers that have made the change?
Sure. I would say webinars, because they established my authority and my presence.
Yep.
I would say, I guess about a year and a half ago, I switched to retainers. And that was huge in my business.
Well, I remember the call. You came on the call, didn't you? And inside the group, you had about 4 or 5 people jump in. And basically the direction from the whole inner circle was, well, just move retained, up your fees, move retained, and it was a gulp moment, but it worked with the authority that you obtained from the webinars. What's the third one? There's a third one.
This past year, I attended 2 conferences, and that was huge. I mean, I had well over, just from that 2 days, my deals from those 2 days were $150,000.
Because we put together an email and put together a lead magnet of type, didn't we? So
yes.
So guys, just for inside the inner circle. So this is the thing we've not even shared, as a quote strategy inside the inner circle. But the point I'm making to you is, no matter where you are and what you need to do in your business, there's a way to do it. And what Laura said, we've got this happening. If I attend the conference, I need to get this happening. So we created a very simple email, and I think it was a lead magnet, wasn't it? In short, so that brought on 150K. So those are the 3 things right now. Just to summarize, then maybe I say we're going to build a plan for the next 90 days shortly. Okay, but if you look to your business maybe in 12 months, what do you see? What do you see as your vision for 12 months in your business? What do you want it to be? What's your role in it?
Andy, I'm going for 7 figures.
Yep.
I'm not sure that I'll get there, but that's what I'm going for. I've got well over that on my books. There's just so much opportunity, but that's what I'm going for. I'm going to do 3 conferences this year. I've already started the nurturing campaign, so I've been rewatching those, your videos on that.
Yep.
So I'm nurturing the attendees of that conference in June right now. So I send out an article every week, and that will help them. And then I've made a big social media push. Last month was the first time I hired a new firm. I've got 5 VAs.
So that's one thing actually we've not discussed, and we'll dig deep on that. So you got a team of VAs now. And remember the first time we spoke, all I heard in the background was dogs. And like today, was dogs in the background. But now, I think you had one lady working for you in sort of a ad hoc manner. But you've got these 5 VAs now, which means the business runs clearly without you. 3 strategies from your progress, or 3 tactics, or 3 even quote things, if we get technical, that would be of value to the group. So you mentioned webinars, you mentioned conferences, et cetera, et cetera. What do you think would be the 3 key things that would be of value?
Well, I think I'm trying to develop a webinar series, a new one, for these residents, and I'm having a terrible time getting speakers. And
okay, so what we'll do is what we'll do is this, Laura. Okay, what you need, I'm going to help you with in a minute. First off, though, what I want to do is look back. So if we look back, so imagine that you're talking to Laura from 2 years ago and say, Laura, listen, if you do these 3 things, you're going to double your business in year 1. You're going to double it again in the first 2 months of 2018, et cetera, et cetera. If you do these 3 things, you're looking back and talking to your younger, more grumpy self. So what 3 things would they be if you look back now? If you're talking to yourself 3 years ago, just do these 3 things, Laura.
Okay, webinars, nurturing campaign.
Yep.
And I think the other thing was having the VAs, getting the VAs on board, and they were developing databases for me.
Let's do this then. Let's spend 5 minutes on each of these, okay? And with the webinars, let's focus on what was the outcome that you wanted from the webinar. So what was the outcome that you wanted? Why did we do it? First of all, what was the outcome you wanted? Then
Okay.
we'll
I
start.
wanted visibility. Oh,
Yeah,
I'm
go on.
sorry.
Yeah, go on, shoot. Yeah,
Oh,
visibility.
okay. And to establish authority in my industry. And honestly, I wanted to give back. I love the doctors I work with, and a lot of them are young,
Yep.
and they want to hear experts in various fields talk.
Yep.
So there were different. It was a three-pronged approach. But again, it was to get my name out there, and it works. I mean, now when I reached out to somebody and they're like, "Oh yeah, I attend your webinars. Thank you. I love them." I'm like, "Oh, this is great. I love hearing that."
Yeah, and what I love about that is if we think about, so for example, Brand has posted in the chat box. So Brand, we know, has done epic things with webinars. You've done epic things with webinars. And what's really interesting is it's not just about doing that first webinar. It's about the consistency, isn't it? It's about the making sure you got a process. So you do the first one, the second one, the third one. So when you started doing the webinars, you said you were pretty much not known in the niche, but now you're the main lady, aren't you? In the niche, people know you. You're like the main lady. So so the outcome was trifold. If we look at maybe what we did, so when we started running webinars, what are the three things that we did, if you could summarize, that really gave it a good catapult? So it might be, for example, identifying the speakers and then getting speakers using the email template. What are the three things that we did that made it work, do you think?
The webinars work,
Yeah.
Andy?
Yeah.
I think it's the speakers.
Yep.
And then once they opted in, they went into active campaign, and so then I would nurture them and try to grow the base that way.
Yep.
But I think definitely the speakers, and also I always allowed the attendees to send me questions, which I would send on to the lecturer, and they were always more than happy to answer back. So I tried to establish rapport. Afterwards I always said, "Do you want a link to the recording?" And if you did, and so I really tried to establish a relationship with those people who were attending and registering as well.
Love that. So what's interesting here, Laura, again, because your niche is so micro-niched, and often, the recruiter mindset is, I want it now, I want it yesterday. And if they don't have it yesterday, it doesn't work. But the sustainability and the long-term growth comes from what you're doing here. And some of you on the call will relate to this. So we've got the speakers, we've got the nurturing, and then basically we've got the relationship building, actually giving back to the attendees. In terms of the third part, so with the webinars, what were the three main outcomes for you, or the three main benefits from running the webinars? So once we got them going, what were the three outcomes for you? So, for example, there'll be the people on the call now thinking, "I want to do it, but if we look at what are the three main outcomes for you?" So a member now can go, "I've been thinking about it, but shit, I'm going to do it now." What would they be, the three main things?
Well, I would say one, they did give me authority.
Yep.
Two, it gave me confidence.
Love that.
Because I knew people needed me. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So I knew people needed me. I knew they needed my service, and I knew they were appreciative because I would get tons of feedback. And that was very encouraging, that they really wanted to hear from these speakers, and they really appreciated me organizing the webinars.
Yep.
And then I grew my database, so of people who were opting in. And that really helped because I felt like I could go to them with positions that I was trying to fill, and hey, any colleagues, this is what I'm looking for, and so forth.
Love that. So we got the authority. So we've attained huge authority using the Maven process. We've got internal confidence because you're feeling appreciated. I mean, let's face it, most of us either work from either home or on the beach or in an office, and it's a pretty isolated life. And when you do get someone say to you, "Thank you," or you've inspired me to do whatever next, or whatever it's going to be, it does make us feel good, doesn't it? It makes you think it's worth it. So love that. I completely relate to that. And of course, number three, grew the database. And again, because your niche is so small and micro-niched, it's even more important that we get the engagement from the prospect, not just the data built. Love that. So number four, in terms of the webinar process, if you could give three pieces, in fact, I'll keep it simple, one piece of advice So looking back in terms of what you did, if you could do one thing differently, so remember on the call is going to take it on board, run the Maven process. If you could do one thing differently, what would it be?
I would create my schedule further in advance, my webinar schedule further in advance.
Yeah.
So I would have it 6 to 9 months so I could let people know what was coming up.
Love that.
I was a little too flying by the seat of my pants. So I would definitely, because a lot of the speakers were booked too.
Yep.
So they'd be booked 6 months out. And so that's what I would do. I would have a firmer schedule further out as well.
Love that. And what that also means is your VA or team member, they can set it up all for you and get it all set up in advance. So guys, webinars. Who's thinking about it? What question you've got for Laura? Or what's been your insight? Listen to that. So for those of you who've not done it, excuse me, it's not just running a webinar. It's if you want the authority and you want to get the transference of trust, but do it in a really simple way without you having to do pretty much any, limited work compared to creating the content, a Maven webinar is what you need. And that's what Laura's done here. So in terms of that Maven webinar process, you've heard from the outcome that Laura wanted, the key wins, the authority, but the internal confidence, love that, but also grew the database, but really actually getting business from that process. And then one thing to do differently, create a schedule. So any questions, Laura, on that? Let me see. Brian, working part-time and 7 figures, love it. Webinars, audio, video, live. So it's pretty much like now. You can see the screen. What's the best value add? How you doing, Rob? How you doing, Lee? What's the best value add items to get speakers to want to take the time to do a webinar? Rob, simply you just need to use the Maven email template in the members area. If that doesn't convert, let us know and we'll find out why and fix it. But if you use the Maven email template, typically you get 25% to 75% of speakers come back to you and they speak for free. It's about framing it right. If you have any problems, let us know. How long did it take? How much work did it take to get set up? So in short, Mark, there's not there's work involved, but setting up a webinar is a pretty simple process. Once you've done the first one or two, your VA is going to run it. Laura, from your perspective, Mark's asking how much work did it take to get set up? Now knowing what you know and knowing how simple the process is, how would you describe to Mark how long it takes now, or how it's not a pain, is it?
No, actually, I was amazed how easy it is to host a webinar. It truly is. You prep your introduction and your close, but it's very easy. And I think my introduction probably is because of my audience. It's not what probably some of you all do just because I know I'm going to lose them, but I know all of my attendees typically stay the entire webinar.
Nice.
So that was great. But I think I was amazed that it was as easy as it was. It took a little while for my nerves to calm down, but I kept getting better and better. And then my audience they kept coming back. And so the same ones was growing, and then the same ones were coming back. And I had a huge international audience as well. I mean, I could have anywhere from 7 to 10 countries represented on my webinars.
Love that.
So, but it was easier than I thought, for sure.
So Mark, if you go inside the members area, if you search for Maven webinars, you're going to find all you need. So the templates to get the speakers, the structure of the webinar themselves, it's all laid out for you. It's all there. How the content's created, it's all laid out for you, Mark. Okay, so but it is really simple. Here's the thing: you could go into any niche now, and you can set up a website 1.0. You can set up your LinkedIn if it's the right platform. You could build a data set. You can start running a set of campaigns, and you can run an authority campaign. So it might be, for example, the podcast strategy. It could be content calendar strategy. It could be, in this case, the Maven webinar strategy. But if you combine a campaign with an authority strategy and you're consistent with it, I bet my house on it, you're more likely to get huge success than failing. But the key word is consistency. A lot of people inspired by this, Laura.
One thing I would like to add is that I was lucky that I work with academic institutions, and teachers, professors, they love to teach. So they were, for anybody who might be in a similar situation, it was easy to go to them and say, would you be on my webinar? Because a lot of times they had lectures prepared, or they were working on, or they published a book. But that academic route gave me an easier supply of lecturers.
Yeah. And for those you've asked, so a few people have asked about getting speakers, etc., and I can sense by the questions, you've got maybe an internal constraint. Is it that simple? Yes, it is. So the Maven email template, so basically that's the template you send out to the Maven. We didn't have that 5 years ago. We had I can't remember who it was, my bad, but we had a member getting Maven speakers, and a speaker came back and they wanted $5,000, and then we worked on a updated template, tweaked it, and she spoke for free. So that template, although it's just quote an email, it's actually went through many, many, many iterations to get it how it is. So there's an email template sent out to the speakers. We've had speakers who are members of Parliament in the UK. We've had United Nations people. We've had huge names in FMCG. We had the guy who took Leo, the guy's name, George Foreman Grills to Wall Street, which is a massive name in FMCG. So you're going to get speakers, not a problem, guys. So remove that constraint now. Inspirational from Ken. Blake, is Laura's client at university? Where is she trying to recruit? Where is she trying to recruit? Let me just read through this. So I think in short, what Blake's saying is, who's your candidate? Are they coming from university, or are they already qualified, etc., and in the workplace already?
Both.
Yep.
Both.
Nice.
So some of them are experienced 10 to 15 years out, and they're the great ones. When you land candidates like that, because they're far and few between. But I also work with candidates straight out of a residency, and they're much easier to identify, obviously. But the experienced doctors, for example, this week, and I had an interview with a couple, surgeon and an internist, and they were 17 years out, 17 years experience. So they're like a gold mine.
Yeah. And that's the key thing. So if you think about what we're doing with this webinar, there's a number of things going on. There's also a channel to actually speak to your ideal prospect. So Mark, once you decided, just go for it, yeah. Costanzo's done some webinars before. Joining didn't go so well. Webinars, did she produce, outsource, or via produce? So Lee, it really is that simple. What you can do is identify the speakers you want. You can send out an email template, which is in the members area. You're then going to speak to the speaker. They're going to agree to get on the webinar. Then what you can do is set up the webinar, which takes literally a few seconds, well, literally a couple of minutes. You can set up a landing page, and there's a template for that, which again a VA can do. You'll create the content. The VA can set it up in literally 10, 15 minutes. That's it. Your webinar's set. So this isn't a difficult process at all. Has Laura received search referrals from her? Okay, so has Laura received referrals from the presenters, or has a new business come from attendees? So what Brant's got, Laura, is when he runs his own webinar, own Maven webinar, the Maven often becomes a source of referral for him, which is really, really another cool way of using it. Brant's asking, do you get that same process, or do you get any of that from the attendees?
So yes. So the folks that are in academia, typically I will reach out to them for residents' names and references on the references, who's a really strong candidate. And on the attendees, yes. It's not like I get phone calls saying, "Hey, I'm looking for a job." That happens some, yep. But it's more indirectly. They'll tell somebody who will tell somebody, and so forth. Yeah,
and I think that's a key thing there, Laura. Is often we want to put 10p into the slot machine and get a pound out. But what's really going on is it's going to pay dividends in a week, 2 weeks, 3, etc., etc. Let me just go through these questions. Loads of questions on this. Again, Kieran, this is so inspirational, very exciting. Laura, so you're being miserable and inspiring people. Laura the legend. Is there an ideal length of time you recommend we keep the webinar to? Yeah, it's all covered inside the Maven webinar, but 45 to 60 minutes for this case, Mike. What sort of content the webinars have? The speaker will create the content, Ian, so you don't create it. How to identify the content. If you look for the Maven webinar in the members area, you'll find it, but you don't create any content. Does Laura do a lot of NPC RR campaigns? We'll come to that in a second, Blake. Just focus on the webinars. I'll make a note of that. Yeah, a lot of people inspired by this. Let me just see if I can chunk these up. Yeah, great question from Marty. Let's do this then. So, guys, the webinar question, I'm just conscious of Laura's time. You know, she's been very generous already. What we've said is Laura's got 3 key drivers going on here. So we've got the webinars, we've got the nurturing. So what Laura just said, for example, with the webinars is maybe not immediately she gets business from it, but sometimes the call will happen or the candidate will happen. But it's more of a nurturing process, so step 1, 2, 3. But Artie's just posted a great question inside the chat box, which I'll post to you, Laura. What Artie said is, can we talk about how she's converted webinars to business? What I think would be a more powerful question, Artie, would be, can we talk about how she's converted business, or indeed attained the candidates and the steps she's done to achieve that? So, for example, you've brought in 20% of your candidates through webinars. You maybe brought in 30% through RRI. You brought in 50% through ABC. Could you give that sort of summary, Laura? If we look back in terms of what how you've doubled it, we've said that we got the webinars, we've got the nurturing, and we've got the retained stroke, the VAs. Those are the key components. If we focus on those 3, Laura, do you think that would give us the context we need for Artie to sort of disseminate how you've doubled the business, et cetera, et cetera? They came from those 3 components.
Sure. I would say the most effective was the nurturing campaign,
Cool.
and then the webinars. So I would say webinar, again, it's more indirect. For example, I would have professors get in touch with me and say, I would like to show the webinar to my entire class.
Yep.
And so that's huge, because there are all these veterinarians watching, listening to this webinar. And so the residents would get to know me. And then when I went to set up meetings last year at the conference, they're like, oh yeah, I remember, we listened to your webinar in class one day. So I would have to say that was probably most effective. And then the nurturing campaign last year that we did really kind of catapulted me. And then I think the database building. So I'd say webinars 30 to 40, nurturing 30 to 40, database building 20.
Love it.
Have I forgotten something? Yeah, I would say they were. Now, RRR, I run and I'll get some candidates, but my niche is so small that I think you recommend every 90 days. I with everything that I do, it's hard for me to I have to be very conscious of what I do. I just don't want to be a nuisance to my
exactly.
my